That morning, instead of a conference room, Ethan Blackwell called me out to the empty stretch of the open floor. No privacy, no courtesy, just space wide enough for an audience, quiet enough for humiliation to echo. I knew then this wasn't a discussion. He stood near the glass railing, hands relaxed, posture rehearsed. Pack your things. Now. The words carried farther than he intended. You're obsolete, Nicole. He continued. Voice level. A legacy cost. We're eliminating outdate before we continue. Could you wait while I turn on the heater? It's quite cold today. What's the temperature where you are right now? And if you're still here with me, please leave your lucky number as a greeting between us. Perhaps I should introduce myself briefly. My name is Nicole Morgan, for 15 years. I was the chief systems architect. I built the core platform that kept this company alive when ambition outran reality, when systems failed at inconvenient hours, when clients threatened penalties. My work absorbed the damage. Ethan is the new CEO and a completely different person. Ethan presented results. I designed survival. He never asked how the system worked. He only asked when it could be simplified for slides. When he announced my dismissal, I didn't respond. Silence wasn't weakness, it was restraint. I felt the pressure climb the urge to correct him, to name specifics, to defend facts he would never understand. Speaking would have turned this into an argument. I needed it to remain procedural. I closed my notebook slowly. The same one I used to sketch solutions no one else could see yet. I stood, steady enough to irritate him. Around us, the office pretended to work. Just to confirm, I said evenly, is this a termination without cause? Or a restructuring release? Ethan frowned, confused by the question, unaware that he'd already stepped into something irreversible. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Do you know? What you just heard was the emotional truth. The rest will contain some fictional elements and use AI to clarify the lesson and the underlying emotions. Hopefully this resonates with you. If not, please allow yourself to rest early after the firing. Memory didn't arrive gently. It came in waves, each one heavier than the last. I remembered nights sleeping under my desk while alarms screamed, holidays spent patching systems so clients wouldn't notice the cracks. I remembered missing my father's surgery because a core module failed, and missing my daughter's recital because stability mattered more than applause. 29 years of showing up when the company needed me most. The injustice sharpened days later at the shareholder meeting. I watched the live stream from my kitchen as Ethan stood beneath the logo. Smiling, he spoke about resilience, innovation, and my leadership team's vision when the platform's success came up. He used the word I, not we, not the architects who built it. I felt something tighten in my chest as investors applauded a story rewritten without me in it. The next morning, HR called. They needed immediate knowledge transfer, documentation, credentials, access paths. They said it quickly, urgently, as if I were still on duty. When I asked for a laptop, there was an awkward pause. Mine had already been wiped. Security policy. They said I was expected to hand over everything without the tools to do it. That was when the pressure broke into clarity. Digging through old folders, searching for reference notes. I saw it, a clause I had skimmed decades ago and never needed to invoke, a forgotten line tied to involuntary termination, written long before Ethan existed. I stopped scrolling. The anger didn't vanish. Calm arrived where anger had been, not forgiveness, just precision. I opened the filing cabinet I hadn't touched in years, the bottom drawer where history lived instead of nostalgia, contracts, notebooks, yellowed diagrams. I wasn't searching wildly. I knew what I was looking for. The patent folder was thinner than I remembered. My name sat on the cover, not the company's, back then. Filing it personally had felt procedural, a temporary safeguard while lawyers rotated and mergers piled up. The assignment was supposed to follow. It never did. Not through reorgs, not through leadership churn, not through Ethan's arrival. I read the employment agreement slowly, line by line, the way I used to read logs during outages. Buried in the language was a clause no one quoted in meetings. Involuntary termination without cause triggered automatic reversion of ownership to the original inventor. No approval required, no negotiation, just activation. The realization didn't explode. It settled. Ethan hadn't just dismissed me. He had flipped a switch he didn't know existed. By treating my role as expendable, he had handed control back to the person who built the system he was bragging about. I checked timestamps. I checked filing numbers. Everything aligned. The patent was still live. The clause was still enforceable. And the termination paperwork HR rushed through was clean, careless, and absolute. That's when the leverage became visible. Every product demo, every client pitch, every promise Ethan planned to make rested on technology the company no longer owned. They just didn't know it yet. I prepared the notice without ceremony. Date, clause reference, documentation attached. The submission felt ordinary, almost boring, which made it more dangerous. Systems fail loudly. Compliance works quietly. When I clicked submit, nothing dramatic happened. No alerts, no calls, just confirmation. Then I noticed the timer. 24 hours until public records updated. 24 hours before the market, legal, and the board would see the truth. I closed the laptop and sat still. For the first time since the firing, I wasn't reacting. I was waiting. Leverage changes time. And time had finally shifted today. I didn't rush the submission. Control comes from sequence, not speed. I reviewed every attachment once more, confirming names, dates, signatures. The reversion notice was plain, almost dull, which made it powerful. No accusations, no emotion, just compliance. When I uploaded the file, the system responded with a neutral confirmation, received, under review. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't revenge. It was alignment. The rules the company wrote were now working exactly as designed. Within hours, the legal database reflected the change internally. Ownership status pending update. Original inventor listed as primary rights holder. My name, unaccompanied by any corporate logo. I checked twice, then closed the page. The technology I built no longer belonged to the people who dismissed it as obsolete. The calm surprised me. I made coffee. I answered no messages. Silence. This time was strategic. Let them discover it in their own order. Panic reveals more than confrontation ever does. By late afternoon, an automated acknowledgement arrived. The filing met all criteria. No disputes on record. No blocks. The system didn't care who Ethan was. It only cared about validity. And validity was on my side. I began outlining next steps, not for attack, but for continuity, licensing scenarios, enforcement boundaries, what would be required if they asked, and what would happen if they didn't. Control is knowing outcomes before others realize they're choosing one. That evening, as I reviewed the company calendar out of habit, a detail surfaced that sharpened everything. Tomorrow morning, strategic client demonstration, a flagship showcase built entirely on the core architecture I designed, the same core now sitting legally outside their walls. I smiled then, not with satisfaction, but with certainty. They would walk into that room believing nothing had changed. Present slides, make promises, trust systems they no longer owned. The click had already happened. The value had already moved. They just hadn't felt it yet. And by the time they noticed the silence, the consequences would already be scheduled, documented, and irreversible, unfolding not through anger, but through process, timelines, and signatures they once believed protected them completely and publicly. They discovered it by accident, which made the reaction almost funny. Legal flagged an inconsistency during a routine check, a junior associate noticing my name where the company logo should have been. The email was marked urgent, then escalated, then quietly walked into Ethan's office with careful language and folded hands. "This looks like a clerical issue," Ethan said, according to someone who heard it through the glass. "Fix it, ignore it, proceed, ignore and proceed." He loved commands that sounded decisive. Legal didn't argue, they documented. Silence. Again. Did the work. The CTO didn't share Ethan's confidence. He understood dependencies. By mid-afternoon, his messages grew shorter, stripped of optimism. We need clarification. Then, are we sure ownership hasn't changed finally? Nothing at all. Fear doesn't announce itself. It tightens. I watched it unfold from a distance. Not interfering, not correcting. There was a strange satisfaction in restraint. Every minute they delayed multiplied the damage. Every assumption sharpened the edge waiting for them. By evening, someone in legal reran the check using public records. The result didn't change. My name remained. The system hadn't glitched. It had obeyed. Ethan doubled down. We're not derailing tomorrow for paperwork, he said in a leadership sync. Engineering. Stay focused. That's when the irony became complete. In his urgency to look strong, he skipped the one question that mattered. No one had told the board I was gone. My termination sat buried in a departmental update, invisible to directors fixated on tomorrow's demo. So while Ethan dismissed warnings as technical noise, the company prepared to present technology it didn't own. Approved by a board that believed its architect was still inside the building, I closed my laptop and let the night settle. They thought it was a system error. It wasn't. It was a mirror. Finally reflecting how carelessly they treated the foundation they stood on. I didn't warn them. I didn't interrupt the spiral. Quiet satisfaction comes from watching momentum carry people toward consequences they chose themselves. Convinced authority could outrun documentation. Unaware the ground had already shifted beneath their certainty entirely completely. The board learned the truth the way institutions always do, late. Abruptly, and with lawyers in the room. An emergency meeting appeared on calendars without explanation. Directors stopped asking about slides and started asking about ownership. That was when Ethan's confidence finally cracked. He stood at the head of the table, insisting it was a misunderstanding. We're dealing with a filing anomaly, he said. Legal is correcting it. No one nodded. One director asked, quietly, why the inventor's name appeared on public records. Another asked why no one had disclosed my termination. Ethan deflected. He talked about timing, optics, distraction. The questions sharpened. Did you fire her without cause? Silence answered before he did. My phone rang while they argued. Unknown number, board assistant, polite urgency. Nicole, the board would like to discuss a path forward. Negotiation dressed as courtesy. I listened without responding, letting the pressure travel through the line. Minutes later, Ethan's voice cut in. Tight. We can resolve this internally, he said. There's no need to escalate. Escalate. As if the situation hadn't already climbed beyond him. I finally spoke. I'm open to a conversation, I said. Measured. Once leadership reflects reality. There was confusion. What does that mean, someone asked. It means I won't negotiate while Ethan Blackwell represents this company. I replied. He made the decision. He owns the consequences. The line went still. Someone inhaled sharply. Another voice whispered my name like a warning. They pushed back. They asked for flexibility, for discretion, for time. Pressure layered onto pressure. Each appeal heavier than the last. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. Control doesn't require volume. I'll wait, I said. But not under these terms. When the call ended, my hands were steady, inside that boardroom. Panic was spreading. Authority had collided with accountability, and only one of them could survive the impact. The pressure didn't lift, it condensed. Waiting for the moment procedure overtook ego, and the company realized this crisis wasn't external, but authored entirely by the man still sitting at the table with consequences already locked in motion. If you agree that refusing to negotiate while the person responsible still holds power was the right move, leave a 1 in the comments. Your voice matters, because speaking up is often the first step in forcing accountability where silence once protected it. Hours later, the board called again. This time without preamble. They wanted terms, not explanations, not apologies. Terms meant leverage, and leverage meant I was finally being heard. I laid them out calmly. First, a formal licensing agreement granting the company limited rights to use the core technology. Second, written recognition of authorship, public and internal, correcting every document that had erased my name. Third, Ethan Blackwell's resignation, effective immediately. I didn't soften it. Conditions lose power when dressed as suggestions. Ethan exploded. His voice cracked through the speaker. "This is extortion," he snapped. "You're trying to destroy the company out of spite." Spite was an easy word for men who never paid the cost of silence. I let him finish. "Power doesn't interrupt. You're mistaken," I said when he paused. "I'm preventing you from destroying it yourself." The board tried to mediate. They asked if the first two conditions might be enough. They spoke about optics, stability, investor confidence. I listened, unmoved. Without accountability, none of it mattered. Ethan wasn't a symptom. He was the failure point. He pushed harder. "She won't risk tanking tomorrow's demo," he insisted. "She needs us." That was the moment clarity sharpened into inevitability. "You can't legally run tomorrow's demonstration without my authorization," I replied. "Presenting that system without a license constitutes willful infringement." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words carried their own weight. Silence returned. Heavier now, someone on the board whispered a question to legal. The answer wasn't shared, but I felt it land. Ethan swore under his breath. The fight drained out of him as realization replaced anger. Without me. Tomorrow wasn't a setback, it was a violation. I wasn't seeking revenge. Revenge is loud and temporary. I was enforcing boundaries, quietly, precisely, and with consequences that couldn't be argued away. That was how power shifted, not through shouting or threats, but through patience, documentation, and the certainty that silence, when chosen deliberately, can command outcomes louder than any confrontation in the end. The room didn't erupt when the vote happened. It emptied of sound. Directors looked down. Legal counsel stopped pretending neutrality. And Ethan Blackwell finally understood that confidence has an expiration date. The chair cleared his throat and said it plainly. "All in favor." Hands rose, one by one. Without drama, no speeches, no hesitation. When the count ended, the decision felt less like punishment and more like correction. Ethan laughed once, sharp and brittle. "You can't be serious," he said, scanning faces that refused to meet his eyes. He searched for allies he assumed loyalty had purchased. There were none. The board had already moved past him. A folder slid across the table. His resignation letter. Prepared. Final. The same efficiency he admired when it benefited him. "This is coercion," he snapped, pushing back his chair. "She's holding the company hostage." No one responded. Legal adjusted their glasses. The CTO stared at the grain of the table. Silence did what arguments couldn't. The chair spoke again. "Sign it, Ethan, or tomorrow becomes indefensible." The word hung there, heavy, indefensible. He knew what it meant. His hand shook when he picked up the pen, not from fear of losing his job, but from the realization that power leaves faster than it arrives. He signed. Ink met paper. Authority ended quietly. I watched through the screen, detached, not triumphant. Collapse doesn't need witnesses cheering. It only needs inevitability. Ethan stood, said nothing, and walked out carrying less than he entered with. Afterward, the board turned to me. "We'd like you back." Someone offered carefully. A title. Oversight. Restoration. Framed as respect. I declined, not angrily, not dramatically. "I won't return." I said, "I've already moved forward." They didn't argue, they couldn't. My absence wasn't a threat, it was a boundary. When the call ended, I felt no rush, just relief. Ethan lost everything he thought defined him. I gained distance. Sometimes justice isn't reclaiming a seat at the table. It's choosing not to sit there again. And that choice, finally, was the one thing no board vote could ever take away from. I didn't feel victorious when I filed the incorporation papers. I felt light. For the first time in decades, my work belonged exactly where it should. With me, the new company was small, deliberate, and clean. No inherited politics, no borrowed authority, just a structure designed to do one thing well. The patent transferred easily. Ownership was already clear. I licensed nothing on day one. I waited. Control works best when it's patient. News travels fast in familiar circles. Former clients reached out quietly. The way people do when they want honesty instead of marketing. They asked careful questions. Are you available? Can you support continuity? Would you consider a fresh agreement? I answered with clarity and boundaries, not resentment. What surprised them wasn't my confidence. It was my calm. I wasn't trying to replace my old company. I was building something better, intentionally smaller, legally sound, and immune to executive theatrics. Weeks later, the call I expected finally came. Not from Ethan, not from legal, from procurement. Polite, formal, detached. They needed access to the core technology to meet contractual obligations already signed. They spoke carefully, avoiding my name at first, as if ownership were still a debate. It's simple, I said. You'll need to license it. There was a pause. Then paperwork? The irony settled in slowly. The company that called me obsolete now needed my authorization to operate. The platform they once claimed as vision required my signature to exist in practice. I didn't inflate the price. Punishment wasn't the goal. Precision was. When the agreement finalized, I felt something release in my chest. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. Market forces restoring balance where ego had distorted it. My company moved forward, lean and focused. Their company moved forward too, but with a dependency they could no longer deny. Competition doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it's born quietly, through documentation, discipline, and the freedom that comes from finally choosing not to be owned by someone else's certainty. That independence changed how I worked, negotiated, and trusted myself moving forward without apology or hesitation at all. Justice didn't arrive with applause. It settled quietly, like a ledger finally balanced. Ethan Blackwell faded from the industry without announcements or sympathy. No interviews, no advisory roles, no quiet reinvention. He simply stopped appearing, as if confidence alone had been his only credential. The company survived. It had to. Systems kept running. Contracts stayed active. But control was gone. Decisions now moved slower, filtered through licenses and approvals that no longer answered to old assumptions. They learned restraint the hard way. I didn't replace them. I stood across from them, an equal, finally, not defined by loyalty or silence. Negotiations were clean, professional. They needed what I built, and I offered it without bitterness. Only terms. What satisfied me wasn't the outcome, but the symmetry. No shouting, no spectacle. Just consequences following choices. Exactly as written. Power returned to its proper owner without drama. Balance arrived slowly, proving that justice can be quiet, contractual, and permanent when ego finally steps aside. Completely forever. People ask if I regret not going back. I don't. Fairness doesn't require permission, and dignity doesn't need an office badge. They told me to pack my things. I only took what truly belonged to me. What stayed with me after everything wasn't the contract, the numbers, or even the quiet satisfaction of balance restored. It was the realization that value doesn't disappear just because someone powerful decides to stop seeing it. Skills, integrity, and years of honest work don't evaporate when a badge is taken away. They wait, sometimes patiently, sometimes painfully, but they wait for the right moment to stand on their own. This story isn't really about winning. It's about choosing not to break when you're treated as disposable, about resisting the urge to shout, explain, or beg for recognition, and instead asking yourself a harder question: if this happened to me, how would I respond? Would I rush to prove my worth to people who already decided not to see it? Or would I step back, breathe, and protect what truly belongs to me? There's a human lesson here that goes beyond offices and titles. Fairness often doesn't arrive through noise. It arrives through clarity, boundaries, and the courage to trust yourself when the room turns cold. And sometimes, the most ethical choice isn't revenge or forgiveness, it's alignment. If this story made you pause, even for a moment, you're already part of its meaning. By sharing your thoughts in the comments, you help others realize they're not alone in facing unfair moments. And if you choose to subscribe, like, or share this video, you're doing more than supporting a channel. You're helping stories like this reach someone who might need perspective, strength, or quiet courage right now. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.